The elevator doors slid open with their familiar mechanical whisper, revealing the marble lobby of Pinnacle Financial Services. I stepped out into the bustling morning chaos, my laptop bag slung over one shoulder, a leather portfolio clutched in my other hand. The portfolio wasn't heavy, but it felt like it carried the weight of my entire career inside. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. After 3 years at Pinnacle, I thought I understood how the game was played. I'd worked late nights, weekend presentations, client dinners that stretched past midnight. But more than that, I'd had Rachel Morrison as my mentor, the woman who'd taken me under her wing from day one, who'd taught me everything about corporate finance, who'd promised me that hard work always pays off. The promotion to senior associate was supposed to be mine. The position I'd been groomed for, prepared for, practically promised. Instead, yesterday's announcement had felt like a slap across the face delivered with corporate politeness. Congratulations to Derek Sullivan on his promotion to senior associate. The email had read. Derek, who'd joined the company 8 months after me, who'd never stayed past 6 p.m., who spent most client meetings nodding along to whatever Rachel suggested. I found Rachel in her corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking downtown Phoenix. She was reviewing quarterly reports, her signature red reading glasses perched on her nose, auburn hair pulled back in that perfect executive bun she'd mastered years ago. Morning, Jessica, she said without looking up. How are we feeling about the Morrison Industries pitch? Actually, I wanted to talk about something else, I said, closing the door behind me. She glanced up, eyebrows raised. Oh? I sat down across from her mahogany desk, the same desk where we'd strategized countless campaigns, where she'd given me advice about climbing the corporate ladder, where she'd told me I reminded her of herself at my age. The promotion, I said simply. Rachel's expression shifted, not surprised, but careful. Like someone who'd been expecting this conversation and had already rehearsed her responses. Ah, she said, removing her glasses and setting them down with deliberate precision. I know you're disappointed, Jess. Believe me, I fought for you. In that boardroom. The words sounded rehearsed, polished. Nothing like the Rachel who'd stayed late helping me perfect presentations or who'd grabbed impromptu coffee to discuss strategy. You fought for me? I repeated. Of course I did. But the partners felt Derek's leadership experience gave him an edge. You know how conservative they can be about these decisions. Leadership experience. Derek had been a shift supervisor at a retail store before joining Pinnacle. I'd managed a team of 12 analysts at my previous firm. I see, I said, keeping my voice level. And there's nothing that could change their minds? No additional projects I could take on, no metrics I could improve. Rachel leaned back in her chair, and for just a moment, I caught something in her expression. Relief? Satisfaction? It was gone before I could be sure. I'm afraid the decision is final, Jessica. But don't worry, your time will come. These things have a way of working out. That afternoon, I couldn't concentrate on the Morrison Industries pitch. Something about Rachel's reaction kept nagging at me. In 3 years, she'd never brushed off my concerns so dismissively. She'd never told me to just wait and see. I decided to do something I'd never done before. I looked up the promotion committee meeting minutes. As a senior analyst, I had access to general corporate documents, though I'd never thought to dig into internal decisions. What I found made my stomach drop. There was no record of Rachel advocating for me. In fact, according to the meeting transcript, she'd actively recommended Derek, citing concerns about my attention to detail and ability to handle client relationships independently. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the words. This was the woman who'd praised my detail-oriented approach just last month. The woman who'd sent me to handle the Peterson account solo because she trusted my client skills completely. Something was very wrong. That evening, I called my college roommate Sarah, who worked in HR at a tech company in Seattle. I needed someone outside Pinnacle to help me think through this objectively. It doesn't make sense, I told her over video chat. Rachel's been my biggest supporter for 3 years. Why would she suddenly sabotage me? Sarah was quiet for a moment, then asked, Jessica, what kind of access do you have to financial records in your role? Pretty extensive, actually. I handle budget allocations, vendor payments, expense reports for our entire division. Why? Just thinking, when mentors suddenly turn on ments, especially in finance, there's sometimes a reason that has nothing to do with the mentee's performance. Her words stuck with me. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying every interaction I'd had with Rachel over the past few months. The way she'd started handling certain vendor payments herself instead of delegating them to me. How she'd begun scheduling client meetings without including me, claiming she wanted to streamline the process. The way she'd seemed nervous when I'd offered to help with the quarterly audit preparations. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. The building was quiet, most employees wouldn't arrive for another hour. I sat at my desk and opened the financial database, telling myself I was just doing routine work, checking expense reports like I did every week, but instead of looking at this week's submissions, I went back 6 months. Then a year. Then 2 years. What I found was a pattern so subtle, so carefully constructed, that I almost missed it entirely. Small discrepancies in vendor payments. Invoices for consulting services from companies I'd never heard of. Travel expenses for conferences that, when I cross-referenced with industry calendars, didn't exist. Each individual transaction was small enough to slip under the radar. $2,000 here, $3,500 there, $1,200 for professional development. But when I added them up over 2 years, they totaled nearly $180,000, and every single fraudulent transaction had been approved by Rachel Morrison. I spent the next 3 days quietly building a case. I cross-referenced bank records, verified vendor information, tracked down conference schedules. The consulting companies were shells, registered to a P.O. box in Tucson with no actual business operations. The conferences were fabricated. The professional development courses didn't exist. Rachel wasn't just stealing from Pinnacle Financial Services. She was doing it systematically, methodically, and she'd been covering her tracks by gradually taking over financial oversight responsibilities that used to be shared with me. And now I understood why she'd sabotaged my promotion. As senior associate, I would have had expanded access to financial records, mandatory training on fraud detection, and direct reporting relationships with the audit committee. I would have discovered her scheme within months. By keeping me in my current role and promoting Derek, who had no financial background and no interest in the detailed work I excelled at, Rachel had protected herself from the one person most likely to uncover what she was doing. The betrayal cut deeper than any professional disappointment. This wasn't just about a promotion. This was about a woman I'd trusted, admired, and modeled my career after, who had been using that relationship to steal from our company while systematically limiting my growth to protect herself. I made copies of everything: bank records, fake invoices, email approvals, vendor registration documents. I organized it all into a comprehensive file that told the complete story of Rachel's embezzlement scheme, but I didn't go to HR immediately. I had a better idea. Derek Sullivan might have gotten my promotion, but he was about to become my unwitting ally. He was scheduled to give his first major presentation to the board next Tuesday, a quarterly financial overview that would include budget variance analysis. I requested a meeting with him on Friday afternoon, ostensibly to transition some ongoing projects and share insights about financial oversight responsibilities. Derek was eager to prove himself in his new role. When I offered to help him prepare supplementary materials for his board presentation, materials that would showcase his attention to detail and thorough analysis, he jumped at the opportunity. "I really want to make a strong first impression," he told me. "Rachel mentioned that the board values comprehensive financial reporting." "Absolutely," I agreed. "In fact, I've been working on some variance analysis that might be perfect for your presentation. Would you like me to include it in your board packet?" Derek nodded enthusiastically. He had no idea that the variance analysis I was preparing would highlight every fraudulent transaction Rachel had approved over the past 2 years, complete with documentation proving the vendors were fake and the services were never rendered. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. Derek would present the information as a routine financial analysis, demonstrating his thoroughness and analytical skills. The board would see the discrepancies and immediately launch an investigation. And Rachel would be caught completely off guard, with no opportunity to destroy evidence or craft explanations. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. That weekend, I refined the presentation materials. I didn't include accusations or conclusions, just raw data, professionally formatted, with clear documentation of every suspicious transaction. Let the board draw their own conclusions. Monday morning, Derek stopped by my desk to review the materials one final time. "This is incredible work, Jessica," he said, flipping through the variance analysis. "I had no idea there were so many irregular patterns in our vendor payments." "Financial analysis often reveals interesting trends," I replied neutrally. "I thought the board might appreciate seeing our thoroughness in identifying areas for potential process improvement." Derek nodded, completely missing the implications of what he was about to present. "Rachel's going to be so impressed that I caught these discrepancies in my first week." Tuesday arrived with unusual tension in the office. Board meetings always created a buzz of nervous energy, but today felt different. I watched Derek head into the boardroom at 9 a.m., carrying his presentation materials and radiating confidence. Rachel was scheduled to attend as well, to provide context for Derek's financial overview and answer any questions about departmental operations. I couldn't concentrate on work. Every few minutes, I found myself glancing toward the boardroom, wondering how the presentation was unfolding. At 10:30, I saw Derek emerge looking confused and slightly panicked. At 10:45, two men in dark suits arrived at the elevator. I recognized one as the company's external legal counsel. At 11:15, Rachel's office door closed, and it didn't open again for the rest of the day. The official announcement came Thursday morning. Rachel Morrison is no longer with Pinnacle Financial Services, effective immediately. Derek Sullivan will be transitioning back to his previous role while we conduct a search for permanent leadership in the financial analysis division. That afternoon, I received an email requesting my presence in the CEO's office. Margaret Chen was a formidable woman who'd built Pinnacle from a small regional firm into a major player in southwestern finance. She was known for her direct communication style and her intolerance for corporate games. "Jessica," she said as I entered her office. "Please, have a seat." I sat down, trying to read her expression. Was I in trouble for my role in Derek's presentation? Had Rachel somehow implicated me in her scheme? "I want to thank you," Margaret said, surprising me completely. "Thank me?" "The financial analysis you prepared for Derek's presentation was exemplary. It led us to discover a significant compliance issue that could have cost this company much more than the $180,000 we've already lost." She leaned forward, hands folded on her desk. "I have to ask, did you know what you were uncovering when you prepared that analysis?" I considered my answer carefully. I noticed patterns that seemed inconsistent with normal vendor relationships. I thought the board should have complete information about our financial operations. Margaret nodded slowly. Rachel Morrison had been with this company for 12 years. She was being considered for a VP position. If you hadn't discovered her embezzlement scheme, she would have had access to much larger budgets and much less oversight. The weight of that statement settled over me. Rachel hadn't just been stealing, she'd been positioning herself for bigger theft opportunities. "I'm promoting you to senior associate," Margaret continued. "The position you should have had from the beginning. But more than that, I'm creating a new role for you, Director of Financial Compliance. We need someone with your analytical skills and integrity to ensure this never happens again." 3 weeks later, I was settling into my new corner office when I received a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't recognize, Amanda Foster, a former Pinnacle employee who'd left the company 2 years earlier. "I heard about what happened with Rachel," she wrote. "I wanted you to know, you're not the first person she sabotaged to protect herself. She blocked my promotion to senior analyst in 2019. I could never prove it, but I always suspected she was hiding something. Thank you for having the courage to expose the truth." Other messages followed. Former colleagues who'd been mysteriously passed over for advancement. Analysts who'd been reassigned to different projects when they'd asked too many questions about budget discrepancies. People who'd left Pinnacle feeling defeated and confused, never understanding why their mentor had suddenly become their obstacle. Rachel Morrison had been running her embezzlement scheme for at least 4 years, systematically sabotaging anyone who might uncover her theft. I'd been just her latest victim, but I'd also been her downfall. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Rachel pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud, receiving a 3-year prison sentence and full restitution requirements. During the investigation, prosecutors discovered she'd been funding a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control after her divorce. The woman I'd trusted, admired, and tried to emulate had been living a lie, stealing from the company. That employed us both, and destroying the careers of anyone who might threaten her secret. But here's what I learned from the experience. Betrayal by a mentor cuts deep precisely because it violates the fundamental trust that makes professional growth possible. However, that same experience taught me to value my own instincts, to trust my analytical skills, and to understand that integrity isn't just about avoiding wrongdoing, it's about having the courage to expose it when you discover it. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at the Southwest Financial Professionals Conference about fraud detection and ethical leadership. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of ambitious young analysts and seasoned executives, I thought about Rachel and the lessons her betrayal had taught me. The most dangerous financial fraud, I told the audience, doesn't come from strangers or obvious criminals. It comes from people you trust, people you respect, people you want to become. And the best defense against that fraud isn't better software or stricter policies, it's having the courage to question the people you admire when the numbers don't add up. After my presentation, a young woman approached me, reminded me of myself 3 years ago, eager and idealistic and looking for guidance. "I'm struggling with something at work," she said quietly. My supervisor keeps changing my reports before they go to senior management, and I'm not sure why. The changes seem to make the numbers less accurate. I handed her my business card. Trust your instincts, I told her. And document everything. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones we most need protection from. As she walked away, I realized that Rachel Morrison had taught me something valuable after all, just not what she'd intended. She'd taught me that real mentorship isn't about following someone else's path blindly. It's about developing the skills, integrity, and courage to forge your own way, even when that means confronting the people you once trusted. But the story wasn't over yet. 2 months after my conference presentation, I received an unexpected call from Detective Maria Rodriguez with the Phoenix Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Rachel's case had opened doors to a much larger investigation. We've been tracking a network of shell companies across Arizona, she explained during our meeting at a downtown coffee shop. Your documentation on Morrison's embezzlement helped us connect several cases. We think she might have been part of something bigger. The detective slid a folder across the small table. Inside were financial records from 3 other companies in Phoenix, all showing similar patterns of fraudulent vendor payments, fake consulting fees, and fabricated conference expenses. The amounts are staggering, Detective Rodriguez continued. We're looking at over $2 million stolen across multiple firms over the past 5 years. All orchestrated through a network of mentorship relationships. My blood ran cold. Mentorship relationships? Each company had a senior-level woman who'd built trusted relationships with younger employees, then used those relationships to avoid scrutiny while they embezzled funds. When employees got too close to discovering the truth, they were systematically pushed out or sabotaged. I stared at the documents, recognizing the patterns immediately. The same shell companies Rachel had used. The same fake consulting services. The same gradual assumption of financial oversight responsibilities. We need your help, the detective said. Your analytical background and first-hand experience with Morrison's methods make you uniquely qualified to help us build cases against the other perpetrators. Are you willing to consult with our investigation? 3 weeks later, I found myself in an FBI field office in downtown Phoenix, working alongside federal investigators who'd taken over the case. What we'd uncovered wasn't just embezzlement, it was an organized fraud ring that had been operating across the Southwest for years. The mastermind was someone I'd never heard of, Victoria Blackwood, a former CFO who'd been quietly recruiting women in senior financial positions at various companies. She provided them with shell company setups, money laundering techniques, and most importantly, strategies for maintaining their trusted relationships while systematically stealing from their employers. Rachel hadn't just been a thief, she'd been a student in a criminal enterprise that taught respected professionals how to exploit the very trust that had built their careers. The psychological profile is fascinating, Agent Sarah Kim explained as we reviewed the case files. These women weren't desperate or obviously criminal. They were successful professionals who got recruited into what they saw as a sophisticated financial opportunity. Blackwood convinced them they deserved more than their salaries, that their companies were exploiting them, that this was just evening the score. The investigation revealed that Rachel had been sending 30% of her stolen funds to Victoria Blackwood as a consulting fee for access to the fraud network. In return, she received ongoing coaching on how to identify potential threats, like ambitious junior employees who might discover discrepancies, and strategies for neutralizing those threats through career sabotage. That I'd been targeted not just because I was getting too close to her embezzlement, but because I fit a specific profile that Blackwood had taught her to watch for: detail-oriented, analytically minded, trusted with financial access, and positioned for advancement that would increase oversight responsibilities. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. Rachel hadn't just stolen money and sabotaged my promotion. She'd been systematically destroying careers as part of a calculated criminal strategy. But here's where the story took an unexpected turn. Agent Kim approached me 6 weeks into the federal investigation with an unusual request. We want to run a sting operation, she said. Victoria Blackwood is recruiting new members for her network, and we think you'd be perfect for an undercover approach. The plan was audacious. I would pose as a disgruntled financial executive looking for ways to supplement my income. Using my legitimate credentials and insider knowledge of Rachel's methods, I would approach Blackwood's network and document their recruitment process, training methods, and ongoing criminal activities. It's not without risks, Agent Kim warned. These people are sophisticated. They've managed to operate for years without detection. If they suspect you're working with law enforcement, the entire investigation could collapse. I thought about all the people whose careers had been destroyed by this network. The junior employees who'd been sabotaged and never understood why. The companies that had lost millions in stolen funds. The trust that had been systematically exploited and violated. I'll do it, I said. The next phase of my life became something I never could have imagined. By day, I maintained my role as Director of Financial Compliance at Pinnacle. By evening, I was Jessica Chen, a fictional identity created by the FBI, reaching out to contacts in Blackwood's network and expressing interest in alternative income opportunities for finance professionals. The recruitment process was more sophisticated than I'd expected. It began with casual conversations at industry networking events, progressed to private dinners where trust was carefully built, and culminated in exclusive seminars disguised as advanced financial strategy workshops. Victoria Blackwood was charismatic, intelligent, and utterly convincing. She presented embezzlement not as theft, but as aggressive income optimization and correcting systemic compensation inequities. She taught her recruits to see themselves as victims of corporate exploitation who deserved to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Companies profit from your expertise while limiting your compensation, she told a room of 15 women during one of her seminars. We're simply adjusting that equation to reflect your true value. For 3 months, I documented everything. The training materials that taught recruits how to identify vulnerable vendor relationships. The psychological techniques for maintaining trust while systematically betraying it. The network of shell companies and money laundering operations. That made the embezzlement possible. Most disturbing was the mentorship component. Blackwood explicitly taught her recruits to identify promising junior employees who could threaten their operations, then use mentorship relationships to monitor, manipulate, and ultimately sabotage those employees. Young analysts are your biggest risk, she explained during one recorded session. They're hungry, detail-oriented, and desperate to prove themselves. But they're also trusting. Use that trust. Become their mentor, their advocate, their role model. Then you control what they see, what they report, and how they interpret financial discrepancies. I thought about my own relationship with Rachel, how she'd used every principle Blackwood was describing. The late-night strategy sessions that had really been surveillance opportunities. The career advice that had been designed to keep me focused on areas that wouldn't threaten her embezzlement. The promotion sabotage that had been a calculated defensive move rather than random professional jealousy. The federal raid happened on a Tuesday morning in November. Coordinated strikes across 7 companies in Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. 15 arrests, including Victoria Blackwood and the remaining members of her network. Over $3.2 million in recovered funds and frozen assets. I watched from the FBI field office as agents executed search warrants at the consulting firm where Blackwood had been running her advanced financial strategy workshops. 3 years of evidence gathering, months of undercover work, and hundreds of hours of recorded conversations had finally culminated in justice, but the personal victory came later that day, when Agent Kim handed me a transcript from Blackwood's interrogation. Morrison was one of our most successful recruits, Blackwood had told investigators. She understood the mentorship strategy perfectly. She identified Jessica Hartley as a primary threat within 6 months of her joining the company and managed that threat relationship for over 2 years without detection. Seeing it in black and white, the confirmation that I'd been targeted, manipulated, and betrayed as part of a systematic criminal enterprise, was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because the depth of the deception was worse than I'd imagined. Liberating because it confirmed that my instincts had been correct, that the betrayal hadn't been personal weakness but professional predation. The trials began the following spring. As a key witness in the federal case, I testified about Rachel's methods, Blackwood's training techniques, and the systematic nature of the career sabotage I'd experienced. Defense attorneys tried to portray me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but the recorded evidence was overwhelming. Rachel Morrison received an additional 5 years in federal prison for her role in the broader conspiracy. Victoria Blackwood was sentenced to 15 years and ordered to pay full restitution to all affected companies and individuals, but the real victory wasn't the prison sentences or the recovered money. It was the moment during my testimony when I looked directly at Rachel, the woman who'd been my mentor, my role model, my trusted advisor, and felt nothing but pity. She'd traded her integrity, her freedom, and her future for money she didn't need and validation she'd never really earned. She'd destroyed her own career and the careers of people who'd trusted her, all to participate in someone else's criminal vision. I'd gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that I could trust my own judgment, stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult, and rebuild my career on a foundation of genuine accomplishment rather than manipulation. The ripple effects of the investigation continued for months. Companies across the Southwest implemented new financial oversight procedures. Professional organizations updated their ethics training to address mentorship exploitation. Industry conferences began featuring sessions on identifying and preventing Internal fraud networks. I was invited to speak at these conferences, not just about fraud detection techniques, but about the psychological aspects of professional betrayal and the importance of trusting analytical instincts. Even when they conflict with personal relationships. During one particularly memorable presentation at the National Association of Financial Professionals annual meeting, a woman in the audience asked a question that stopped me cold. How do you rebuild trust in mentorship relationships after experiencing that level of betrayal? She asked. How do you avoid becoming cynical about professional guidance? I paused, thinking about my own journey from that devastating promotion meeting to this moment, standing before hundreds of financial professionals as a recognized expert in fraud prevention and ethical leadership. Betrayal by a mentor doesn't discredit mentorship, I said finally. It discredits that particular mentor. The solution isn't to stop trusting professional relationships, it's to develop better judgment about who deserves that trust and to maintain your own analytical independence even within trusted relationships. After the conference, the same woman approached me with a business card. Dr. Linda Patterson, Director of Ethics Training at Arizona State University's Business School. We're developing a new curriculum on ethical leadership and fraud prevention, she said. Your experience, both the victimization and the investigation, provides exactly the kind of real-world perspective our students need. Would you consider joining our faculty as an adjunct professor? Teaching had never been part of my career plan, but standing in that lecture hall 3 months later, looking out at 50 eager MBA students, I realized I'd found something I'd never known I was looking for, the opportunity to use my experience to protect the next generation of professionals from the kind of systematic betrayal I'd endured. My story with Rachel Morrison had begun with betrayal and devastation. But it had evolved into something much larger, a career built on genuine expertise, a platform for protecting others from similar exploitation, and the satisfaction of knowing that my experience had helped dismantle a criminal network that had been destroying careers and stealing millions for years. The promotion I'd thought I wanted at Pinnacle Financial Services seemed insignificant compared to the impact I was having as an educator, consultant, and fraud prevention expert. The corner office I'd once envied paled in comparison to the lecture hall where I was shaping the next generation of ethical financial leaders, but perhaps most importantly, I'd learned to trust myself, my instincts, my analysis, my judgment, in ways that no mentor, no matter how well-intentioned, could have taught me. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed my career had ultimately made me stronger, more independent, and more effective than I'd ever been under Rachel's guidance. Sometimes the greatest mentors are the ones who teach us we don't need them anymore. Rachel Morrison had been that mentor, though not in the way either of us had intended, and that strength, earned through betrayal and built through courage, was something no one could ever take away from me. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.